Welcome, my friends, to the Merri channel. This is Cameraman, inviting you to sit back and enjoy. Today's show, number 48, The 60's Show, starring Merri and Ella, recorded live in the Merri studios. So now, ladies and gentlemen, let's have some fun and a great time. Here's Merri.
What a wonderful welcome. Thank you, cameraman. Today is a very special show. What show is it, Ella? People are probably wondering why we're dressed this way.
Yeah, it's the 60's show, and guess what? I'm 60. I was born in the 60s, and I love the 60s music.
Oh, awesome. But when I think about the 60s, I just think of like the big band, and my big band was the Beatles.
Oh, and Elvis Presley, and he was big. He started late 50s and 60s. Oh, wow. And the Beatles and the Hollies. You know that song they came up with? You're my brother, you ain't heavy, you're my brother. That's in 1969.
Oh, that's so nice.
We all know about that song, and I love the Hollies too. And the Bus Stop, that's one of my terrific songs. And what other songs you like, Merri?
I like a lot. Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Oh, yes.
I mean, there's a lot of people. I like the Monkees.
Oh, the Monkees. Yeah. Oh, definitely. The Birds. Oh, my gosh. We had so many bands back then.
Definitely. And the Rolling Stones. You can't forget the
Rolling
Stones.
How can you forget the Rolling Stones, Janis Joplin? How can you I mean, there's so many bands and such great bands. And Badfinger, well, they were early 70s, but I think they started like 1969, 1970. So yeah, I like their song, Baby Blue. I love that song, Baby Blue, and I got my blue on.
You got your blue on, girl. Very good. Well, let's start off with our 60s.
Okay.
Well, the star of the decade in 1960, one of my favorite cartoons when I was growing up, I used to watch, was the Flintstones. Fred, Wilmer, Betty, and Barney make their debut on the Flintstones, which premiered on September 30th. And Dennis will like this one, since he likes Merri Tyler Moore.
Oh, yes.
In 1961, the Dick Van Dyke Show makes its debut on CBS on October 3rd. And that's my anniversary, October 3rd.
There you go. You'll never forget that date.
And October 1st, 1961, Groucho Marx introduced the new host of The Tonight Show, and guess who that is?
Johnny. Remember Johnny
Carson? I thought it was Cameraman with our new beginning.
Johnny, well, the name's there. Not Johnny, but John. Pretty close.
That's right.
Johnny Carson.
Right. And October 28th, 1963, Martin Luther King stands at the Lincoln Memorial and speaks to a crowd about his famous speech, the I Have a Dream speech.
Oh, I have a dream. Oh, what a beautiful speech.
It was a beautiful speech to change our country, really.
Oh,
and
definitely.
In 1964, I just talked about them earlier, the Beatles.
Oh, yes.
They made their American debut on the Ed Sullivan Show to a crowd of screaming fans.
There you go.
And thus begins Beatlemania.
Now,
can you imagine being a young girl and going to the show and how excited they must have been?
Especially when you took a look at George Harrison. He was my favorite.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. Oh, I thought he was so handsome. How about you?
I was Paul. I was like Paul.
Oh, Paul. Well, there you go.
They said that even some of the gals even fainted in the audience. Like, that's how excited they
of course.
were.
They're young, raging hormones.
I know. And in 1966, it's hard to pinpoint who started the trend, but Mary Quant created a sensation when she started selling. What do you think she started selling?
Mini skirts.
That's right, the mini skirts. At her hip boutique bazaar in London. And with her leggy look and crop do, Twiggy is named the face of 1966.
So in 1967, football's top game debuts. It's another thing that we can imagine not being around, but this year marks the first Super Bowl. Ooh. The Packers ended up beating the Chiefs.
Interesting.
Wow, I didn't know that. You learn something new all the time.
The men in our audience would probably like that. A little bit of history. Football history.
Yeah. For in December 22nd, 1967, The Graduate premieres. It would become one of the top 10 grossing films of the 1960s.
Dustin Hoffman and that song, The Graduate.
Okay, so now on October 11th, 1968, Apollo 7, the first manned flight in NASA's Apollo program, successfully launches into orbit.
Ooh, interesting.
1969, Man on the Moon. Wow, this was a historical event.
Yes, it was.
Man on the Moon. Man on the Moon. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. That's a quote from Neil Armstrong. That's proclaims as he takes the first step onto the moon.
Very
And Merri.
And with a theme song that's stuck in your head, and it's not the Mariella song, okay? It's the Brady Bunch. Here's on October 26, 1969.
There you go.
And, you gotta read this next one, girl.
Elvis Presley. Boy, so handsome, so talented. Did you know that Elvis Presley, every time, after his daughter was born, he would call before performing. He would always give her a call. Can you imagine? So Elvis Presley scores his final #1 hit with the song "Suspicious Minds" on November 1st, 1969. Okay, in 1969, we all know about Woodstock. We know all the bands. Well, of course, you just go on the internet and type in the bands that participated. There were so many. And the last act of the show, Woodstock Merri, had to do with the guitarist. He was a legend. Do you know who he was?
Jimi Hendrix.
Yes, Jimi Hendrix. They saved the best for last.
And he was a left-handed guitar player.
Yes. And he was so successful. What a legend. The music festival concludes on August 17, 1969. And the iconic 3-day festival of peace, love, and rock and roll, do the twist, included acts such as Richie Havens, Joan Baez, The Who, Janis Joplin, Creedence Revival, Clearwater Revival, and Jimi Hendrix was the last act. The older the music gets, the 60s music, the more precious it will be.
Yeah.
And hopefully, who knows, 200-300 years from now, people will be still saying, wow, rock and roll. Rock and roll. And then Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. And then we have the Beatles, the band, because Elvis Presley was, single solo.
So this now leads us to our next segment. And now for the top songs of the decade. First is I'm Sorry by Brenda Lee. And Tossing and Turning by Bobby Lewis. Then Please Mr. Postman by the Marvelettes. Hello Dolly by Louis Armstrong. And Sugar Sugar by the Archies.
Oh, I love every one of these songs. Oh, yeah. And Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head by B.J. Thomas. And the theme from A Summer Place, Percy Faith and his orchestra. And the twist. Oh, my goodness, Merri, the twist. We got to do some twist.
I guess so. Yeah,
And
great exercise.
So I'm getting too old for that kind of exercise. Let's do the twist. Stranger on the Shore by Mr. Acker Bilk.
good to
And it's Now or Never by Elvis.
Elvis.
Double thumbs up.
Elvis.
Oh, yes.
And here's some lyrics that I made for the 1960s. Ella, why don't you start?
Oh, yes, the 1960s songs. 1964 was the year when the Beatles appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. Whoa! And they were so young and so happy and full of smiles, great music. Wow, they could cheer up anyone.
That's for sure.
Everyone knew the Guess Who. And the Monkees were a lot of fun.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And learning the hula steps by listening to Elvis's Rock-a-Hula Baby. Woo!
Woo.
And listening to the wonderful sounds of Tom Jones.
Mm.
Rocking and rolling with Clearwater Revival.
Ooh,
And the Rolling Stones sang and rocked to Satisfaction.
Oh, yes.
Love the 60s. Woo!
Oh, and the Birds, and there were so many different bands, and the Hollies, and I already mentioned the Hollies. Gosh.
And this now brings us to our next section.
Oh, yes.
This now brings us to our last words, and this is a wonderful quote from John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Yes, everybody knows about that quote.
I saved this last one for you,
Oh,
girl.
it has to do with Elvis.
Yeah.
I believe the key to happiness is someone to love, something to do, and someone to look forward to. And that was by Elvis Presley.
Yes.
Well, hope everyone enjoyed our 60s show.
Yeah.
And take care, everyone. And whenever you listen to the 60s music, hopefully it will bring a smile on your face.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And that's all, folks.